Okay, so now we're diving into government auditing standards, which is one of the other standard guidelines that we initially referenced when we were breaking down all of the different types of standards within assurance engagements. Okay, so the standards or guidelines when auditing a government entity will be Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, or GAGAS. And there are a few differences between Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, also known as GAS, and Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards. Okay, so we're breaking out some of the key differences to give you the full picture when thinking about auditing a private company versus a government entity. So for one, the authoritative standard setting body is different. Okay, so Generally Accepted Auditing Standards is issued by the AICPA Auditing Standards Board, or ASB. And if we are auditing a public company, that is going to be set forth under the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, or the PCAOB. And the guidelines are outlined under PCAOB-AS. Whereas now, when we're talking about government auditing standards, you could think of GAGAS as the government audit equivalent to GAAS. Okay, so this is the outlined set of rules, and this is often referred to as the Yellow Book standards. So I want you to go ahead and think of a big yellow book here when we think about government auditing. Okay, so this is organized by ethical principle standards or audits, attestation engagements, field work, and performance reporting. And we're going to dive into some of the details for that in just a little bit. Okay, so what's going on in this big yellow book is going to include the rules, aka the standards for government organizations, programs, and functions. And it's going to provide government assistance to contractors, non-for-profits, and other entities as well. So when conducting government audits, it's important to understand that financial statements can be prepared under different accounting frameworks. So this is going to compare the two types, GAAP-based financial statements and those prepared under special purpose frameworks. On the left, we have GAAP basis financial statements, which are conducted in accordance with the Yellow Book. And that's, again, the nickname for government auditing standards, or GAGAS. So the primary objective in these audits is to verify whether the financial statements present information fairly in all material respects. So these audits are typically used by public agencies and government entities following standards for U.S. accounting rules under GAAP. And on the right, we shift to financial statements prepared under special purpose frameworks, also known as OCBOA. So that stands for the Other Comprehensive Basis of Accounting. These might include the cash basis, the tax basis, or regulatory basis of accounting. In government audits, the use of OCBOA is usually specified by a government regulator, depending on the nature of the program or funding requirements. So these audits can still fall under Yellow Book standards and may also apply to non-issuers under AICPA standards or even issuers under PCAOB standards, depending on the circumstances. All right, but the ultimate takeaway here is that not all government audits follow U.S. GAAP. The framework depends on the nature of the entity, the purpose of the audit, and the requirements of the governing body or funding source. Right, government auditing standards, again, don't just apply to government agencies. They can actually be used in audits of both public and private companies. But depending on the type of company being audited, different auditing standards will also apply. All right, so for private companies, which are not publicly traded, audits must comply with AICPA standards specifically, those issued by the Auditing Standards Board, as we mentioned, or ASB. So these are the same as GAAS standards. Okay, so we discussed that earlier. Think back on that if you're unfamiliar. So when we think about it, think of a local pizza shop receiving government funding. An audit would be to follow Yellow Book standards due to the government funds, but also AICPA standards because it's a private company. On the other hand, public companies, those that are traded on stock exchanges, must comply with PCAOB standards established by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. So if a public company receives federal funding, its audit must also adhere to Yellow Book standards in addition to PCAOB standards. All right, so to sum it up, government auditing standards can layer on top of existing requirements, depending on whether the entity is public or private. So understanding this overlap ensures auditors follow the correct framework for both the organization type and the source of funding. So now let's think about the purpose of government audits. When conducting a government audit, the CPA's job is to determine whether the organization is complying with applicable laws and regulations. but that's just the broad goal. To achieve this, the auditor focuses on 3 specific areas: accuracy, internal controls, and compliance. So first we have accuracy. This means the auditor verifies that the financial data reported by the entity is accurate and reliable. Are the numbers on the financial statements truly reflective of what's happening in the organization? This is critical, especially when taxpayer dollars are at stake. Next, the auditor evaluates internal controls. The goal here is to ensure that the organization has effective systems in place to prevent fraud, mismanagement, or misuse of funds. Strong internal controls reduce the risk of error or unethical behavior and support accountability. All right, so finally we have compliance. This is also going to get assessed. This refers to whether the organization is meeting its financial obligations under grant agreements, contracts, or applicable laws. So in other words, are they using the funds for their intended purposes? Right, the name of the game here is to help ensure transparency, accountability, and proper stewardship of public funds. So in addition to financial audits, government auditors also perform attestation engagements, which are another type of audit service conducted under Yellow Book standards. These engagements are focused on verifying the accuracy or reliability of specific information outside of traditional financial statements. Alrighty, so attestation engagements can take the form of an examination, a review, or an agreed upon procedures engagement. So each of these varies in terms of scope and assurance level. So for example, an examination provides a high level of assurance, while an agreed upon procedures engagement is more limited and based on what was agreed in advance with the client. All right, but we're going to talk more about SSAE and SSARS here in just a little bit. All right, so for those of you who are unfamiliar, those are the standards for typical attestation and review engagements. All right, so just going through that at a high level so you understand what and how this applies to attestation engagements. All right, so what types of subjects are covered in these engagements? Attestation work might involve testing for compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, or grant agreements, or assessing the effectiveness of internal controls related to compliance. Auditors may also evaluate how management presents its discussion and analysis, right? Its MD&A. And that is going to also include reviewing the reliability of performance measures used to track program results. All right, so overall, attestation engagements provide independent verification of critical information that government agencies and oversight bodies use to make decisions, allocate funds, and ensure public accountability.